Okay. So I was a building manager in this apartment building uh, in San Francisco, and I worked for these slumlords. They call themselves Skyline Realty. They had a few names because every time they got sued for something, they would change their name and pretend to be a different entity. But they would very aggressively try to buy people out. This was 2005, 6. So it was after the second dot com boom, which it stuck. So even though we were in a very low income area and a sketchy as fuck area, man, places where you would walk by people shooting up in their necks and stuff like that. So even though we were in that kind of area, prices were going up all the time. But San Francisco was uh, it was basically a, what would they call it, a rent controlled city, which meant that they could only, maybe 1% or something like that. So that's why they would so aggressively try to move people out, and they would offer up to 20 times the amount of the rent or something, just to get them out. But of course, that money would go quickly or whatever. So there was this. I thought that they were a couple, but they weren't. It turns out they were both older, but he was quite a bit older. He was in his late 70s, maybe early 80s, and she was in her mid 50s or something. And as I mentioned, she referred to him as Mr. I forget what his last name was. And they were already living there when I moved in, when I came in as manager. So, unbeknownst to me, they were bought out. They accepted the deal and they moved to another. And they would also help them to find another apartment. So they bought them out. Then they moved to this other apartment. And from what I understand, the man died. Mister What's his name? And I guess she was inconsolable, or I don't even know why. Whatever happened, but she ended up coming back to the apartment building to jump off of the what I thought was the roof. So of course, being the manager at the time, I was, or I wasn't the manager. I'd just gone through some bullshit with them, but I was still kind of there. There wasn't another manager. I was basically living there until I left to go back to Thailand. And so they come and they're like, "Hey, come see the body," and blah blah blah. And you identify the body, and sure enough, so we go up to I think the second floor. We had four floors or three floors, and she had fallen down onto the catwalk, onto the, and so I see her there, etc. And then afterwards, all the police are gone and everything, and I go home, I go back into my apartment building, and she comes to me, and she basically comes to me like I can feel this presence in the room and whatever. And I hear her say, "They think that I fell off the roof, that I threw myself off the roof, but I didn't. I threw myself out of the upstairs window." And she said, "The reason that I chose to come back here to kill myself was because I knew that you wouldn't judge me." She says, "You've always been so nice. I knew that you would not judge me, and that you would take care of things, and you wouldn't judge me." And so later the next day, one of the other tenants came and said, "Hey, what's going on?" And I said, "Oh, there was a suicide or whatever." She goes, "I wondered." She lived on that top floor. She goes, "I wondered because I saw this woman at the top floor window, and I wondered what was going on." And she goes, "And then I went back into my apartment and I came out and all I saw left was her cane." And I was like, "Oh, okay." Sure enough, there was my confirmation that what I'd heard from the ghost was actually true.